Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Pastor Mortensen, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's a really big pleasure for me because I used to play basketball in this gym when we used to have a big stage over on that corner. Remember that? And boy, was I a bad basketball player. Imagine me, right? Anyway, I've had the pleasure of speaking and teaching kids just a little bit older than you, and when it comes to socialism and democratic socialism versus conservatism, boy, I heard it all, right? So I'm going to start off today by asking some of you, what do you think about the term democratic socialism? Anybody? What do they believe in? Free healthcare. That's one of their platforms. I'm sorry? Equal income, right? There's a disparity between the people that have and the people that don't have, right?
Higher taxes.
Higher taxes, but they don't run on that, right? That's the little hidden story that no one wants to know about. Go ahead. I can barely hear you. More regulation on business, right? Try to equal the playing field, right? They want to make sure that everything is nice and fair for everybody. Go ahead. Welfare. That's a big one, right? They want to make sure that you have free housing, that you have free college, right? That's a big one. I mean, at Texas State, where I used to teach, that was like really the big one, right? Free college for everybody. The only problem with all of that is that these politicians don't ever want to talk about how they're going to pay for it, right? I'm always hearing the 1%, tax the 1%. Let me give you a little hint on what's going on with the 1% that they want to tax. If the government wanted to confiscate every single penny that the 1% currently owns, they'd only come up with about $1.2 trillion. That's it. All of it. The government's going to come in at gunpoint and say, give me all your money. Give me all your property. All they come up with is $1.2 trillion. Now, if you've been paying attention to any of the newscasts, there have been lots of reports that state that these programs that these democratic socialists are coming up with will cost about $42 trillion. 42 trillion with a T. Where are they going to get that money from? It's a big hole in their argument. But what's selling is the word free. Free for everybody. Let me tell you something. There isn't anything more expensive than something that costs free. So don't ever be fooled by that scenario. So we're going to start off. Let's define what socialism is. I've had a lot of students come up to me and say, you know what? We're living in a socialist society now. And I'm thinking to myself, really? When did that happen? Then they started to tell me, okay, well, I'll give you an example. We have a police department. That's socialism. Really? We have a community hospital that's free. That's socialism. I'm like, really? What else? You have friends, right? Tell me, what do they describe as socialism that we have now? Huh?
Like the welfare state, I guess.
The welfare state. That's socialism, right? Really? Any others? All right, good. So let's define what real socialism is all about, okay? As defined by the people who invented the term socialism and its operating systems, okay? In short, I'm going to give you like 3 or 4 different definitions of socialism. The first one says, any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of means of production and distribution of goods. What does that mean? Say it again.
The government controls everything.
It says ownership and administration, right? In the state of Florida, what does the government own and produce? What? I can't hear you. There's too many people. Oranges. Well, I think crop owners might differ from you. Does the state own and produce anything? No. No. A system of society or group living in which there is no private property. Does your mom and dad own a home? Yeah, they do. How about yours? Whose family here owns a business? Lots of you. Does the government own that business? No. No. So we are in a society that has private ownership, correct? Excellent. A system or condition of society in which the means of productions are owned and controlled by the state. So let me ask you a question. When the government builds a road, is that socialism? No. No, it's not. Okay? So a lot of students that I've dealt with think that all of these are examples of what socialism is like. So the person who's behind all the socialism confusion is a guy named Karl Marx. Karl Marx wrote a book called The Communist Manifesto back in 1848. And in his book, he defined socialism as the stage of society in Marxist theory transitional between capitalism and communism, and distinguishes by unequal distribution of goods and pay according to a work done. So what does that mean? Means that socialism is a stepping stone to communism. There aren't too many places where you have to look around the world and see where a socialist society has turned communism. It's a stepping stone. It's a gateway drug. Does that make sense? Yes? Cool. So that's Uncle Marx right there. So let's talk about social contracts or social compacts. Now, this is a term that's defined by a lot of the philosophers, political philosophers, back a long time ago, such as Hobbes, Locke, and this guy, Rousseau. And he deemed a social contract as an implicit agreement among the members of a society to cooperate for social benefit, for example, by sacrificing some individual freedoms for state protection. That's our police department. Is that socialist? No. What it is, it's a contract between us as a society where we have elected to give up some of our freedom, in this case, financial, in the form of taxes, for society to protect us, to protect our rights, to enforce contracts. That's a good example of a social contract. An actual or hypothetical agreement among the members of an organized society or between a community and its ruler that defines and limits the rights and duties of each. I'm voting tomorrow, right? I'm going to vote for someone who I'm giving permission to act on my behalf as part of a society to protect my interests, to enforce law, to enforce the free trade of commerce. That representative is going to represent me because I'm electing him to do exactly that. I'm giving up some of my freedoms for social benefit. That's a social contract. It is not communism. It is not socialism. Democratic socialists. We've touched on a few of these before. One, free healthcare, free college, free housing. We want our workers to own their corporations. Capitalists, no good, right? Everyone wants a good union paying job. They want to narrow the gap between rich and poor. We've touched on that. They want to end national, racial, gender, and prejudices that prevent us from organizing. Stop climate change by building an economy that's ecologically sustainable. The first thing that comes into my head is electric cars, right? They want to prevent us from having gas automobiles. Build a world without war, without fear of that evil US military intervention and economic exploitation. The only reason why we're going to war is because we want their oil. How many times have you heard that? They want to end mass incarcerations because we're such bad people. We want to incarcerate those people that do evil to us. Police brutality, gender violence, queer intolerance, job and housing discrimination, deportations, and other forms of oppression. This coming from the Democrat Socialist platform. But you know what? Socialism is still socialism, guys. Let's watch Stephen. Oh.
Socialism?
Okay, let's try that one more time. Here we go. How many people know Steven Crowder? All right, so Steven Crowder is pretty cool, right? He's really, really funny. But he really knows his economics. He really knows government. You're going to watch a little short video, and I think you're probably going to really enjoy this, okay? But it brings home to light what democratic socialists and socialists, same difference. Okay, here we go.
Democratic socialism. It's not the same as socialism because it's democratic, right? Or something, right? People are buying that. People buy that now, right? Apparently. As though adding the word democratic in front of a word changes what it means. Just because we toss something to a vote doesn't change what that something is, nor does it alter whether that something is inherently good or bad. Couple of examples, because I know you'll ask. Hamas was democratically elected as the government in Gaza, despite the fact that the destruction of not only Israel, but the eradication of all Jews is in their official charter. Robert Mugabe, or Bobby Mugabe if you prefer, was democratically elected by a loving majority in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, how's that working out? Venezuela? Well, Hugo Chavez, noted personal favorite and friend of Sean Penn, to whom he constantly pointed as being unfairly characterized as a dictator when in fact he was democratically elected as a socialist. Well, how'd that work out for Venezuela? Well, it's now on the brink of collapse, despite it being one of the most resource-rich nations in the entire world. Basic things like eggs, milk, flour, and toilet paper are either too expensive for the average Venezuelan or simply out of stock. Out of stock, mind you, democratically. I know. Some of you will say, well, that's not fair because really we knew all along it technically was a dictatorship. Okay, that's fair. Let's move on to example number 2. Denmark? Okay, here's the time where you point to an entirely homogeneous population, about 1/60th the size of America's, and you point to that as the blueprint. Okay, let's go there. This is a place where the middle class can't even afford a car because of the 180% new car tax. And the Prime Minister was so fed up with Americans pointing to it as a beacon for socialist success that he felt compelled to clarify, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. Sweden? I love Sweden. Okay, great bikini team, and thanks to that country, my armoire now doubles as a bookcase. Speaking of which, the founder of IKEA, let's be honest, the only really cool export from Sweden, aside from a few good hockey players, left Sweden because of the stifling high tax rate. So, Sweden, good place, not bad people, but a successful model for a viable economy in today's global market? Incorrect. The fact is that over time, the greatest enemy of socialism is reality. The reality that human nature will invariably pull certain people toward individualism and success and others toward laziness and collectivism. The tension between the makers and the takers always leads to socialism's inevitable collapse. But I know that I can give you examples of failed socialist economies until I'm blue in the face, and you won't care. Because at least socialism is inherently more morally altruistic than the evil, greedy, capitalist warmongering seen in the West. Greed? What's more greedy than wanting to take from someone else something that you haven't earned? Unlike capitalism, free enterprise, which can only occur truly through voluntary transaction, socialism can only occur at gunpoint. That's what it comes down to. If you don't pay your taxes, once you get through the IRS and the auditing and the lawyers and the PR stunts, people make you give the government your money, an increasing amount of your money, the more successful you are, or they send in scary men with guns to take you away. Now, so long as the people having their stuff taken away at gunpoint are in the minority, and the majority feels that they'll get to benefit from more said taken stuff, you'll always be able to win that decision through a popular vote and claim the moral high ground through democracy. Putting the word democratic in front of your socialism doesn't make it any inherently more moral nor less violent. Did you get that? American wannabe socialists also. Get a job. Please, like a real job. You'll probably have to shave first. I'm Steven Crowder for Prager University.
What do you think? Pretty cool, huh? So, he touched on Venezuela. So I want to ask, how many people here are from Venezuelan descent? We have one, we have two, we have three, we have four. Wow, I was expecting more than that. 4, Venezuela descent. Yes, parents from Venezuela? How many people are here from Cuban descent? Very cool. All right, hands down. All right. So I'm going to take the most recent historical concepts that socialism has taken over in a democratic state like Venezuela, and just go through the paces, okay, of how that turned into a socialist country. So before 1999, Venezuela had a functioning democracy. Everything's running like a top. Okay, had great political institutions that ensured the country that it would remain as a democratic country. It had a very healthy, developing economy, very diverse economy. Oil wasn't the only game in town, right? It had lots of agricultural, they had a lot of banking, they had lots of different industries that were thriving during that time. The most important thing is that it had a growing middle class. There is nothing better than a free market society to develop the poverty-stricken people and move them into the middle class. I will give you a very good scenario for you to think about. In 1982, China was fully communist. They had one problem, though. They couldn't afford to feed their people. So what they did is that they said, okay, let's turn our government into a free market society, but we'll just make sure that they keep a nice, strong grip on what they think and how they perform and everything else. So you had the top part of social communism, then you had the bottom part, which was an economic free market society. Since 1982, how many people do you think came up from poverty and into the middle class? That's called upward mobility. How many people do you think moved from really dirt poor to middle class, where they can actually afford to buy a car? 50 million? Any other guesses? Don't look at your phones. 6 million?
No, 6 billion.
6. They don't have 6 billion people. What class have you been taking? Okay, sit back, put your seatbelt on. Let me tell you exactly how many people went from poverty into the middle class. It's the reason why they're building over 42,000 miles of highways today. 300 million Chinese people got out of poverty and into the middle class. That's amazing. That's an amazing success story. They didn't do it with socialism, though. They did it with a free market economy. Very important to know the difference. And very similar things were happening in Venezuela. They had upward mobility. They had law and order. They had a real police department over there that were enforcing the laws of the country. They had a free press. They were able to look at the political landscape and report properly what was really going on in Venezuela. Unlike today, I guess, here in the United States, but that's besides the point. Foreign investment, oof, this was a big one. There were countries all around the world investing in Venezuela. Why? Because Venezuela was for the lack of a better word, probably the most enriched country in the world. It had lots of different resources that companies all around the world wanted to invest in. They had a world-class education. And what a lot of people don't know is that they have the largest oil reserves in the world, making them one of the richest. Did you know that? So after 1999, Venezuela experienced something that's called capital flight. What is capital flight? This happens in a lot of countries that fear communism and socialism. Does anyone know what capital flight is? I'm giving you a big hint up there. Yes, tell me.
When over two
She's going to read the
fly
slide.
along with their money.
Okay. Yes.
It's the movement of money from one country that's doing something that's in that country to another country where they have more safety.
Yes. So, what he said was moving people who have money, move their money from their country to another. Now, why did they do this? These people are the wealth creators. These people are the job creators. These are the people who had industry. People who knew how to make a buck. And in turn, allowed the populace to have jobs and to enjoy a good middle class income. These people saw the writing on the wall and they left. They hightailed it. Whoever was able to get their money out of the country, now remember, this is going back to 1999, whoever was able to get their money out of the country did so. According to a report, there's about 2 million of them that left that country. So when these people leave, what do you think happens? Economy crashes, yeah. Why is that? Why does the economy crash when these people leave?
Because they were the ones that were supplying all the jobs.
They were the ones that were making the jobs, right? They were the ones that knew how to run a business, how to run a successful business, and how to employ people. These people left. Where did they go?
United States.
In Doral. Exactly. The Doral, West End, right? A lot of them fled to Spain. Everyone's turning to each other and saying, yeah, that's what my parents did. Okay, so we now know what capital flight is. Venezuela now is a failed state. What does a failed state mean? Come on, you were on to something. Go ahead. Profitable, not what I was looking for, but in this instance, you're right. But that's not what I was looking for. What's a failed state? No takers, huh? Yes.
The state that has failed to maintain its economy and its governmental.
Boy, that's very, very close. A failed state basically is where all the democratic institutions have failed. Okay? There's a lot of moving parts in a government that ensures that the constitution of that state can thrive and can be enforced. Okay? This has failed in in Venezuela now. And that's why you have rampant dictatorship going on in that country. This is one that I know personally. Fuel, electricity, and water are very sporadic. My wife works in the insurance business, and she works with a bunch of people in Venezuela to do all her quotes. Not too long ago, they had to shut down their office because just blocks away, there were some bombings going on of oil rigs in oil factories. They also, in another instance, said we could only work from 9 o'clock to about 1 o'clock, because after that, they shut off our electricity. Imagine living in a world like that, where the most basic thing as electricity that we take for granted gets cut off because they can't produce it. It's a pretty bad situation. Basic necessities like bread and toilet paper are in short supply. Imagine toilet paper? What do they use, banana leaves? It's terrible, right? But this is what goes on in a socialistic country. Because guns were outlawed in Venezuela, there is extremely high crime rate in Venezuela right now. It is not safe to be there. The populace does not have a means of being able to protect itself anymore, because they basically have had all their guns taken away. Bad situation. Now the government controls the press. Press can no longer criticize their government anymore. And if they do, they're put in jail. Democracy has been replaced by dictatorship. It all started with this guy, Hugo Chavez, which in 1999 was democratically elected as a democratic socialist. Do you know what his slogan was? For all you Spanish people, you can tell me. Esperanza, cambio. What does that translate into? Hope and change. Does that sound familiar? This man drew a lot of inspiration from his mentor, Fidel Castro. And for the Cuban kids here, you know what happened to Cuba after Fidel Castro? On economics, I quote him as saying, Venezuela is a nation of great wealth, but it's being stolen from its citizens by the evil capitalists and evil corporations. How many times have you heard that here in the United States? A ton of times. Chavez, along the ways, convinces his lawmakers to change their constitution, which resulted in the crumbling of their democratic institutions. Incrementalism, one piece at a time. He started to change laws. And he did so with accomplices in their Congress. Anything that he wanted, his party went along with. And got to the point where he was able, democratically, to stay in office for the rest of his life. Chavez seized multiple industries, promising government would run these companies more fairly and profits would be shared with the people. Who wouldn't vote against that? Only problem is that when he took over these industries, he got rid of all the people that knew what was going on, or they fled, and he filled those roles with Chavistas, people that supported Chavez. Only problem is, most of these people didn't know what they were doing and ran those industries into the ground. Oh, did I do something wrong? Yeah, there we go. He tore up existing contracts with oil and gas companies, namely Mobil Gas and Phillips. He demanded that they pay higher royalties. When they refused, Chavez kicked them out and stole those companies from them. The plants and all their investment is now owned by Chavez and his government. So when those executives left, guess who replaced them? Guys who had no idea what they were doing in the gas and oil industries. And consequently, their main industry that they made a lot of money with went down the tubes. Now, I want you to know this and understand this very, very well. Socialism always works, but only in the beginning. When people have no idea what's going on, their riches are being stolen, and it goes on for a little while. But over time, it starts to collapse, just like what the video said. And by then, it's too late to get out. I know that for a fact because my wife's cousin just got here from Venezuela. After about 2 years of trying to get out, she's an American citizen, mind you. They revoked her American passport. They wouldn't let her leave the country. Finally, through a lot of help from family here in the United States, we were able to get her passports back. She was able to get herself and her naturalized daughter and son over to the United States, but had to leave her husband behind. The country will not let her husband leave the country. Not so many words, he's imprisoned. He can't leave Venezuela. Now, does that sound like a free society that you'd like to live in, where you're that manipulated? Not a good situation in Venezuela. So in 2013, Chavez dies in office, and then this guy takes over, his vice president, Nicolas Maduro. Now, by 2013, Venezuela is just shunned and isolated by the world. They don't want anything to do with this country anymore because they know that their investments are not safe in a communist country. So bad so that many airlines don't even fly there anymore. Imagine that. Just like in Cuba, there are huge and long lines to get your basic needs, to get a little bit of rice. You have to go to this store to get rice. You have to go to this store to get toilet paper. You have to go to that to get your other necessities. You got to go to like 3 or 4 different stores, stand in line all day long just to get the basics to live on. This is what's happening in Venezuela. In 2016, there was a study that basically mentioned that 75% of their entire populace lost an average of 19 pounds. Imagine that, adults. They lose an average of 19 pounds. Why? Because they're starving. They can't go to McDonald's and wolf down a Big Mac like you can. This is cynically known as the Maduro diet. And anyone who tries to go up against this guy, or if a journalist tries to report some accurate information, they are immediately jailed. Throw away the key. We don't want to hear from you ever again. It's pretty rough. So, Venezuela is a cautionary tale. You should learn from recent history. I'm not talking about back in 1959 when Castro took over. I'm talking about just years ago. It's a cautionary tale. You guys have to be aware. You can't be fooled. Once a country goes down the socialistic path, man, it's no easy way to get out. It's hard for people to get away from free stuff, especially in the beginning. But once you go down that path, there's no coming back. The longer a country stays socialist, the harder it is to reform it. You can't fix it after it's broken. And if you don't think that socialism can happen here, then you're fooling yourself. You have to be very vigilant. And it starts with you guys, because you're the next generation. You're going to be out in college, and you're going to be talking to a lot of people who are full-fledged socialists who think that you're a Nazi. You got to know the truth. You got to know history. It's very, very important, and it's up to you guys. So now I'll open it up for any questions. Any questions? Yes. You're just like, Okay, good question. How did Fidel Castro become a communist to begin with? Because he fooled everyone. He came into office, he stormed into office, he took over the government. He promised that the evil capitalists are not going to have their way anymore, that there's going to be free housing, there's going to be free hospitals, free health care, free college. Everyone's going to live like a king. And if you follow me, I will lead you to the promised land. And this was in 1959. By 1964, he acclaimed that he was a full-fledged communist, Marxist communist. By then, it was too late to get out. If you got out, you got out in time. But by 1964, if you didn't hightail it out of Cuba, you're going to be stuck there. And you're going to experience everything that's going on in Venezuela right now. Good question. Any other questions? Yes? No? Yes, sir.
American leadership changes every 4 years. So how bad would it be if a socialist president was elected and they were able to make reforms?
Good question. Okay, so the question is, we have elections every 4 years, and what was the rest of it?
How bad would it get in 4 years?
How bad? Okay. After 8 years of Obama, what happened to the country? What do you think happened to the country? I mean, you're pretty young, right? So, you, from a historical perspective, you don't have a lot of things to think about. But I go all the way back to Jimmy Carter. Gosh, I'm old, Mark. So, what do you think happened?
The economy went down.
Economy went way down. It was the slowest recovery in the history of the country, right? Lots of jobs were lost. Now, but Avey, when he left office, the unemployment was 4.9%. Really? What kind of jobs were out there? How many people left the job-seeking force, right? A lot of people stopped looking for work because they couldn't find work. What was the rate of Americans that were on food stamps? 49 million. It's a lot of people. So, today, we're more divided than ever before. The rhetoric has gotten so ugly in the United States right now, and it all starts with leadership. Now, I know that a lot of people try to pin bad stuff on Trump, and lots of what they say may be true. He's said a few things that I don't personally like. It has no bearing on policy, though. I can honestly say, you know what? I'm not crazy about Trump, but you know what? What he's doing works. I can comfortably say that. But to answer your question, yeah, your vote counts. You need to get out there and vote. And you need to vote for the right people that'll do the right things for our country. And that's why, once you guys turn 18, anybody 18 here yet? Woohoo, yeah. Did you guys vote? Yeah. So it's up to you guys, right? It's up to you guys. Register to vote, go out there, lay low, but vote your conscience, right? Vote for what's right. Anything else? I think we're running out of time.
So that video said that people always want the free stuff, especially that
Yes.
socialism can offer.
Yes.
So isn't our vote kind of useless or
Ooh.
socialism inevitable?
Okay. So he's questioning whether or not our vote really counts. Okay. Collectively, yes, it does count. Because if there aren't people like you out there voting for the right people that have the right ideology, if we don't have those people combating the forces of the free element, we will go down that socialist rabbit hole, okay? That's why it's important for you guys to keep your heads on straight, especially when you go off to college, because you're going to face a lot of opposing forces, and those people are not friendly to you. Trust me when I tell you, okay? But vote. That's how you change society, right? Anything else? Guys, you guys have been awesome. It's been such a pleasure for me to come and speak to you today. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.